Hello and welcome. In the pantheon of modern music, few figures are as enigmatic as Brian Wilson. He is not merely a musician. He is an architect of sound, a composer of pocket symphonies that captured the golden optimism of a generation. He gave us the soundtrack to the endless summer, yet he himself lived through a winter of the soul that lasted for decades. The story of his genius, his breakdown, and his eventual miraculous return is a legend we think we know. It's a story of abusive fathers, psychedelic explorations, debilitating mental illness, and the suffocating weight of perfectionism. But that story, the story of the music, is only half of the epic. The other half, the more human and perhaps more profound story, is that of his legacy not in notes and melodies, but in flesh and blood. It is the story of his 7 children. This is a tale of 2 vastly different families, born from the same man in 2 vastly different eras of his life. It's a saga in 2 movements, the children of the storm and the children of the calm. In this definitive documentary, we will explore each of their lives in unprecedented detail. We will journey into the chaotic heart of 1960s rock royalty to understand the world his first 2 daughters were born into. Then we will step across a threshold of profound healing and privacy to meet the 5 children who were not born of his biology, but were chosen by his heart. This is not just a "where are they now?" This is a deep analytical look at the ripples of genius and trauma across generations. This is the story of what it truly means to be a child of Brian Wilson. Number 7. Carnie Wilson, the inheritor of the storm and the spotlight. The story of the Wilson children begins fittingly in a year of cultural explosion and personal implosion, 1968. On April 29th, Carnie Wilson was born. Her birth certificate might as well have listed her father's occupation as myth. Brian Wilson was at that moment one of the most famous musicians on earth, but the man Carnie would come to know was not the smiling, striped-shirted boy wonder from the album covers. He was what was left after the supernova of creativity that produced Pet Sounds had collapsed into the black hole that was the abandoned Smile Project. Carnie was born into the fallout. Her childhood home in Bel Air was less a family sanctuary and more a grand decaying monument to her father's genius and his illness. The stories from this period are legendary and heartbreaking. This was the era of the infamous sandbox in the living room, of years spent in bed of epic binges on food, drugs, and alcohol. The house was a revolving door of musicians, sycophants, and enablers. For a young child, it must have been a landscape of profound confusion and instability. Her father, the man who wrote "God Only Knows," was a ghost in his own home, a physically imposing but emotionally absent figure lost in a fog of paranoia and depression. She has spoken of a deep loneliness, of trying to pierce the veil of his illness, to find the father she knew was in there somewhere, the man who could create such celestial beauty. This chaotic upbringing forged in her an iron will to survive and a deep, innate understanding of the power of harmony, both musical and emotional. It was almost preordained that she would seek to create the harmony her childhood lacked. In the late 1980s, she, her sister Wendy, and their friend Phillips formed Wilson Phillips. In the landscape of late 80s rock dominated by hair metal and the beginnings of grunge, their sound was an act of radical sincerity. It was pure, unadulterated pop harmony. Their success was not just massive, it was seismic. Their debut album sold over 10 million copies worldwide. The lead single, "Hold On," became an anthem for an entire generation, a message of perseverance that felt deeply personal and authentic. On stage, Carnie was a beacon of charisma and vocal power. She wasn't just continuing a legacy, she was wrestling with it, reshaping it in her own image. For a time, she was arguably more famous than her father had been for 2 decades. But the spotlight she had sought was relentless and often cruel. The media fixated on her lifelong struggle with her weight, a deeply personal battle that was turned into public spectacle. This scrutiny, which would have broken many, became a defining part of Carnie's public identity. She refused to be a victim. In a move that was years ahead of its time, presaging the age of social media transparency, she had her 1999 gastric bypass surgery broadcast live online. It was a shocking, brave, and deeply vulnerable act. She was taking control of her own narrative, telling the world that she would not be shamed for her struggle. This led to a second career as a television personality. She became a host, a reality TV star, a guest on countless shows. She was always authentically, unapologetically Carnie open about her anxieties, her triumphs, her relapses. She connected with millions because she was real. Today, Carnie Wilson is a matriarch in her own right. Married to musician Rob Bonfiglio, she is the mother of 2 daughters, Lola and Luciana. She has found another passion in baking, turning it into a successful business. And most beautifully, the fractured relationship with her father has been lovingly repaired. They have performed together on numerous occasions, their voices blending in harmonies that seem to bridge the chasm of the lost years. It is a powerful sight, the daughter of the storm, having weathered it all, now standing in the calm, creating her own light. Number 6. Wendy Wilson, the guardian of the quiet rebellion. Born on October 16, 1969, Wendy Wilson was the second child of the storm. She was Carnie's shadow, her partner, her confidant. They navigated the same bewildering childhood landscape together, a 2-person alliance against the chaos. She possessed the same genetic gift for harmony, and her voice was a cornerstone of the Wilson-Phillips sound, a pure ethereal tone that perfectly complemented her sister's powerful lead. She experienced the same dizzying ascent to fame. She stood on the same stages, accepted the same awards, and saw her face on the same magazine covers. She was an integral part of the phenomenon, and yet her response to it all would become a quiet, powerful act of rebellion. Where Carnie's journey has been one of public engagement and radical transparency, Wendy's has been a journey inward, a deliberate and graceful retreat from the public eye. After the initial tidal wave of Wilson-Phillips' success, Wendy chose a different path. She had seen firsthand the destructive nature of a life lived under a microscope. She had witnessed the toll it took on her father, and she seemed to make a conscious decision to break the cycle. Her rebellion wasn't loud or angry. It was a quiet insistence on a normal life, a life that was in the context of her family, the most extraordinary thing she could pursue. She married Daniel Knutson and dedicated herself to being a mother to their 4 sons. Her life became one defined not by chart positions, but by family. To understand the depth of Wendy's choice, one must understand what she was rejecting. She was rejecting the narrative that a child of a legend must either eclipse that legend or live forever in its shadow. She offered a third option, simply walking away to build a life of one's own on one's own terms. Her success is not measured in record sales or television appearances. It is measured in the stability and love of the family she has nurtured. This does not mean she has abandoned her art. Wilson-Phillips reunites for tours, and when they do, Wendy's passion for the music is evident. It's a joyful return to a craft she loves. But it is no longer the center of her identity. It is a part of her life, not the entirety of it. Wendy Wilson's story is a masterclass in quiet strength. She is the guardian of her own peace, a peace she fought for, not by shouting but by choosing a different way. In the grand, often noisy saga of the Wilson family, her story is a beautiful, gentle melody, a testament to the idea that the most profound harmony can often be found in the quietest moments. Number 5. The Interlude. Melinda Ledbetter and the rescue of a soul. The stories of Carnie and Wendy are a complete chapter. To even begin the next chapter, one must understand the cataclysmic events that separated them. Before there could be more children, there had to be a rescue. Before Brian Wilson could be a father again, he had to be reborn as a man. The agent of that rebirth was a woman named Melinda Ledbetter. In the late 1980s, Brian Wilson was not a man. He was a project. He was under the total 24-hour control of the manipulative therapist, Dr. Eugene Landy. Landy was more than a doctor. He was a warden. He controlled Brian's diet, his finances, his medication, his creative output, and his contact with the outside world. He had systematically isolated Brian from his family, convincing him they were a threat. It was a period of profound psychological abuse, all under the guise of therapy. Into this bleak scenario walked Melinda Ledbetter, a model and luxury car salesperson. When Brian came to her dealership, she saw through the fog of overmedication and the ever-present shadow of Landy's handlers. She saw a glimmer of the sweet, funny, and brilliant man trapped inside. They began a tentative romance, a small act of defiance that Landy immediately crushed, forcing them apart. But Melinda could not forget. She was the catalyst, the one who alerted members of Brian's family and conservators to the true extent of the horror. What followed was a protracted, ugly, and absolutely necessary legal war to free Brian from Landy's clutches. It was a fight for his life. In 1992, the courts issued a restraining order, permanently removing Landy from Brian's life. But freedom was disorienting. Brian had to relearn how to live. It was Melinda who patiently stood by his side, teaching him how to make simple choices, how to function in the world, how to be himself again. She became his anchor, his advocate, and, in 1995, his wife. Their love story is one of the most remarkable in all of music history. It was a love that didn't just create a partnership, it saved a life. It was from this foundation of rescued love and hard-won stability that a new desire grew. The desire to build a family, not from the wreckage of the past, but on the solid ground of their shared future. The decision to adopt was the final triumphant act of his recovery. It was a declaration that Brian Wilson was back, and he was ready to be a father again, this time on his own terms. Number 4. Daria Rose Wilson, the first light of the new dawn. In 1998, the new era of the Wilson family began with the adoption of their first daughter, Daria Rose. Her arrival was more than just the addition of a child. It was a symbol. She was the living proof that Brian's second act was real. The philosophy governing Daria's upbringing was the polar opposite of the one that had defined Carnie and Wendy's. The core principle was a fiercely guarded privacy. Melinda, now the protective matriarch of the family, built a fortress of normalcy around them. There would be no photo shoots, no red carpets, no pressure to perform. Daria was given a childhood, not a role in a celebrity drama. Her experience of her father would have been worlds away from her half-sisters. The Brian that Daria knew was not the tormented recluse, but the gentle, recovering soul. He was the man who was rediscovering his own confidence, who was beginning to tour again, not as a reluctant beach boy, but as a celebrated solo artist. Daria's presence and that of the siblings who would follow became the emotional anchor for this creative renaissance. They were the reason he had to stay healthy, the reason he had to stay present. Daria grew up in a home where her father's legendary status was just a fact of life, like the color of the walls. It didn't define their daily reality. Their reality was family dinner's homework and a father who was, for the first time in his life, truly home. Daria's story is a quiet one, but it is a powerful one. She represents the first light of Brian's new dawn, the promise of a future redeemed from the past. Number 3. Delanie Ray Wilson, building the sanctuary. Soon after Daria, Delanie Ray Wilson joined the family. With her arrival, the promise of a new life solidified into a tangible reality. It was now a family with 2 daughters, a unit of siblings, who would grow up together within the sanctuary Brian and Melinda had so carefully constructed. Delanie's childhood was one of shared experiences with her sister. They were the first members of this new private Wilson generation. They would have navigated the unique circumstances of their life together, understanding in a way no one else could. What it was like to have a father who was both a global icon and a quiet homebody. For Brian, watching his 2 young daughters play and grow must have felt like a miracle. He was being given a second chance to experience the joys of fatherhood he had missed with Carnie and Wendy. He was present for school events, for birthdays, for the small, ordinary moments that constitute a life. These moments were anything but ordinary for him. They were precious, hard-won victories against the ghosts of his past. Delanie's story, like Daria's, is defined by the normalcy she was afforded. She was raised in an environment of love and stability, shielded from the pressures and distortions of fame. Her presence helped transform a house into a home and a legendary musician into a dad. She and her sister were the foundational pillars of the sanctuary that allowed Brian Wilson to continue to heal and create. Number 2. Dylan Wilson, redeeming the father-son legacy. The family dynamic expanded again with the adoption of their first son, Dylan Wilson. The arrival of a son carried a unique weight in the context of the Wilson family history. Brian's own relationship with his father, Murray, was the source of his deepest wounds. Murray was a tyrannical figure, abusive, controlling, and jealous. He was the man who pushed Brian to greatness, but punished him for it, the man who sold away the rights to his son's songs. The father-son relationship in Brian's life was a story of trauma. With Dylan, Brian was given the chance to rewrite that story. He could become the father he never had, one who was gentle, encouraging, and unconditionally loving. He could finally break the cycle of paternal pain that had haunted his family. Dylan grew up in a home that was now a bustling hub of family activity. He was also growing up during one of the most triumphant periods of his father's career. In 2004, Brian Wilson did the impossible. He completed and released his lost masterpiece, Smile. It was hailed as a historic achievement, a resurrection of a musical ghost. Dylan was a young boy watching his father conquer his most famous demon. He was witnessing a story of resilience and artistic victory firsthand. Dylan's experience of his father would be one of a celebrated hero in his golden years, not a tragic figure. He grew up seeing a man revered for his past, but fully living in the present. In raising Dylan, Brian was not only nurturing a son, he was healing himself, redeeming the very concept of fatherhood one day at a time. Number 1. Dash and Dakota Rose Wilson, the final joyful harmony. The family symphony was not yet complete. In 2009, a second son, Dash Wilson, joined the family, followed in 2010 by their youngest daughter, Dakota Rose Wilson. They were the final notes in this beautiful, complex composition of family life. Dash and Dakota were born into a fully established, thriving family. They had 4 older siblings to guide them. They entered a home where the routines of a large, loving family were already in place. Their childhoods have been set against the backdrop of their father's cemented status as a beloved global treasure. They have grown up in the era of the laudatory biopic Love and Mercy, of Kennedy Center honors, of sold-out anniversary tours, where audiences weep with joy just to be in his presence. Their experience is of the complete, victorious Brian Wilson. The struggles of the past are stories in a book, not shadows in their home. The 5 children of Brian and Melinda Wilson. Daria, Delanie, Dylan, Dash, and Dakota are a collective story. They are the quiet, happy ending that no one, least of all Brian himself, could have predicted during the dark years. They are the ultimate achievement of a man who gave the world perfect harmonies, but had to fight for decades to find his own. Their peaceful private lives are his most profound and personal masterpiece. In the end, the story of Brian Wilson's 7 children is a story of 2 profound and differing truths. 2 were born to a genius in the throes of a tragic storm. They inherited a world of chaos and expectation, and through their own immense talent and strength, they navigated the spotlight to find their own versions of peace and purpose. 5 were born into a family built from the ashes of that storm. They were chosen to be the children of a man who had survived a man who, with the help of a remarkable woman, had rebuilt his world. Their gift was not the spotlight, but the precious protected sanctuary of a normal life. 7 children, 7 lives, all shaped by the extraordinary journey of one man. A journey that proves that it is never too late to heal, to love, and to find your way home. The narrative of a musical icon navigating a complex family life is one of the most compelling stories in modern culture. We explored this theme from a different angle in our previous documentary on the legendary guitarist and voice of Pink Floyd, David Gilmour. If you're captivated by the human stories behind the world's most timeless music, we urge you to watch it. You can find the link on your screen. And please be sure to subscribe to our channel, because our exploration of these legacies is ongoing. We will soon be releasing our next in-depth documentary, David Gilmour's 8 Children, The Untold Story. It is a fascinating saga of a blended family rock royalty and the challenges of raising children in a world of unimaginable fame. You will not want to miss it. Thank you for joining us on this journey.